Music Vaani.
Hello everyone. Today we are at the Indian Embassy in Sweden, Stockholm, and we are with His Excellency, Ambassador of India to Sweden and Latvia, Mr. Tanmaya Lal. Thank you so much, sir, for having us here.
Thank you very much. It's good to have you here in the embassy.
And I can see that we are here in the Samand gallery, this prestigious room with a lot of history around the world. Can you please take us through a little bit on that, sir?
Sure. So we call this as our India-Sweden Sambandh gallery. And as you may be knowing, Sambandh is a word which has a similar meaning or same meaning in both the languages of Indian, the Sanskrit language or Hindi, and also Swedish language. So we thought it appropriate to name it as a Sambandh gallery. Here we have tried to depict some of the exchanges that have taken place at the high level during the last 75 years or so. As you may know, last year was the 75th anniversary of India-Sweden diplomatic relations. So some of the pictures are dating back to 7 decades of high-level interaction, both at heads of government and head of state level, and also some of the recent interactions, both prime ministers and other ministerial level. We also have a section where we have the Indian Nobel laureates here, and then there are some other pictures of other interactions. So this really gives us a picture of our Sambandh.
Coming from Mauritius to this corner of Northern Europe, did you expect to have so many cultural connections, especially if one goes back pre-1947? Could you tell, because I know that you have been chasing around and digging around, could you tell something about them?
No, thank you. As you hinted, while our diplomatic relations have been 75 years young, I would say now, but our relationship or threads of interaction go much further back. In fact, a few months back, I was able to go to the Archaeological Research Center in the Stockholm University, where we saw the Kushan era coins, 2000 years old Indian coins, which have turned up in some Viking settlements here in Vallentuna. If you go to Birka, again an old Viking settlement, you have Indian beads depicted in the or displayed in the museum there. There's a very famous Buddha statuette, bronze statuette, that was found in another Viking settlement of Helge, which actually dates back to around 1300 years back. So it shows the kind of global trading networks that would have existed more than a millennia ago. And also, if you see the fika is very popular here, and if you see carnabuler or glögg at the time of Christmas, or the rice pudding that Swedish people enjoy, all have spices, and even rice is not endemic to Sweden. So these have been traded and sourced for a very long time throughout history, and it just shows how initially you may think that these two geographies are very, very distant, but people have known each other or traded with each other for a very long time.
Could you shed some light on the Sanskrit shlokas on the rock in Upsala?
Yes. So around 200 years back, a young scholar, Otto Thulberg, he was interested in learning more about the Eastern, scholarly languages and the civilization at that time. And he was going to Germany to do more studies. And before leaving, he inscribed a Sanskrit verse from Mahabharata on a rock in Upsala, which many people are not aware of. He wrote it, the poem is Nala Damayanti's poem from that episode, and he wrote it for his fiancée. And when he came back, the two got married, but also he set up the first Indology study center at Upsala University, and globally Upsala is not only a very ancient university, but also one of the prominent ones which conduct studies on India and on Sanskrit and Hindi. So it's a very fascinating connection. This is perhaps the only rock in Northern Europe or in Europe which has a inscription in Sanskrit that you can still go and see.
It's when you say that he wrote it for his fiancée, it's almost like a Bollywood film-esque.
It is actually, yeah.
Clearly the Husby Brooks story.
Yes,
when this gentleman.
Absolutely. You had mentioned to me about that. Yeah.
When Sweden was in economic doldrums, and then somebody comes from India having made vast sums of money.
Yeah.
And so that's also so there is a lot of deep connection.
Yes, I mean, if you see, more than 300 years ago, the Swedish East India Company was set up, which was aimed at trading with India. And they went all the way to India, but also then to China and other eastern places. Then there was, if you see 1860s, there were Swedish engineers who were working in India on setting up iron and steel plants and also railways. So there have been many connections throughout several past centuries. Then in around 100 years ago, or a little more than that, there were two very prominent Indian revolutionaries who based themselves in Sweden for a certain number of years. They were Lala Hardayal and Virendranath Chattopadhyay. Both were very prominent revolutionaries who worked for the cause of India's independence. And just after World War I, they based themselves here in Stockholm, in Artillerigatan. I've gone to the building and then seen that location. It's still the same building. And in fact, they were sharing that building along with some Irish revolutionaries. So these are fascinating links that you discover. And of course, before India got independence, you had Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore, who was awarded the Nobel Prize in 1913, before World War I. He was able to come to Sweden after the war ended. He also went to Upsala at that time, Stockholm and Upsala. So many connections.
How do you see this flourishing? The exchange of our brains, the exchange of our cultures, etc.
So yes, the business linkages are very strong and long-standing. I briefly mentioned the old trading networks, but even if you come to the contemporary times, then Ericsson has been in India for more than 120 years. Last year I was in Pune when SKF, another Swedish multinational, they completed 100 years in India. So they have been, the Swedish companies have been present in India even before India was independent and for more than a century. If you see now, there are almost 280 Swedish companies who are present in India. They are estimated to be among the top 5 in terms of making in India. There are nearly 70 or 75 Indian companies who are working here. The diaspora, of course, if you have noticed in the last decade or so, has grown perhaps 2 to 3 times, which is a very remarkable pace of growth. I have met Indian engineers and professionals all across Sweden, from Kiruna in the north, where you have the Swedish spaceport. I've met Indians over there. Any company that you take today, which is doing a lot of good work in terms of developing cutting-edge technologies, Indians are there. Northvolt, H2 Steel, Hart Aerospace in aviation, Candela in electric mobility for maritime transport. Many companies you see that they have talent from India working here. So these links are very strong. You have Indian companies like Tata's, who have now perhaps the oldest, or among the oldest Swedish companies, called Surahammar Iron and Steel Works, is a Tata Group company now. It's been there for 400 years, and they are making specialty steel now. The Birla Group has been here. They own a biorefinery, which actually completed 120 years in 2022. In power transmission sector, you have companies like Kalpataru who have come and are doing very well. So there is very extensive cooperation going on, from space and geospatial sector to heavy engineering to services, digital services, and so on. So very, very close linkages now, business linkages.
Economic linkages, absolutely, just like we have explained. But Indian companies are not simply economically contributing, they are stakeholders in the society. And I know you were giving some examples, so why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, for instance, I had one of the most challenging races here, the Leading a Loppet, is sponsored by TCS. Then the HCL, they are working with a women hockey team, ice hockey team here. So not only in business per se, but also in social sector, sports. I have met Indians now who have published books in Swedish or in English, ranging from artificial intelligence to Ramayana. So many different sectors, people are becoming very active. They are doing well in institutions, in colleges and universities, becoming very active there, or taking up other leading roles in teaching, or across the spectrum now. Indians you come across who are becoming very accomplished in their own ways. I've met young fencers or badminton players and many other sports persons of Indian origin who are excelling here. So it's very good to see that they are taking part in so many different activities.
This is a question I have to ask. Economic growth in India is happening phenomenally. Sweden is on its own path. But environment is one of the issues which everybody deals, and both India and Sweden have taken great strides in environment, in the area of environment, climate. What can be done more, or how do you see that both India and Sweden not just economically aligning, but also aligning when it comes to different environmental initiatives?
So, if you look at environment and climate, India and Sweden have been among the leading countries from several decades back. When this discussion was even beginning in 1970s, 80s, both countries independently, they were working on these issues. The first ever UN conference on human environment was hosted by Sweden in Stockholm in 1972. And India was the only country represented at the head of government level at that time. So this cooperation really goes back a very long way. During my tenure here, the Stockholm Plus 50 conference took place, where again the Indian ministerial delegation was very strongly represented at various discussions. India and Sweden are also at a multilateral level working through an initiative called Lead It, which is called the Leadership Group for Industry Transition. And this was launched in 2019 at the UN Secretary General's Climate Summit in New York. And recently our Prime Ministers, Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson, they launched the Lead It 2.0, because the first phase has been very successful. The membership, it brings together countries and companies in initially what were called the hard to abate sectors like steel or cement or aviation. And the issue is to how to collaborate in terms of technology development, in terms of financial resource mobilization and other advocacy measures to move towards a global net zero situation. So that is again a multilateral or a global initiative that India and Sweden do together. If you come to businesses, again, Sweden is an engineering nation. It's an economy which really thrives on clean technology, on new innovations. And similarly in India, there is a very strong focus on moving towards cleaner solution, more sustainable technology solutions. So there is a very good match. And whether you take sectors like steel, cement, aviation, paper and pulp, or any other sectors like electric mobility, batteries, renewable energy, smart energy. Indian and Swedish companies are working very closely together. India provides the scale and the innovation and talent, and there is a good win-win situation for both India and Sweden.
So there is much more to the role of our embassy here in Sweden than what we know as commoners outside, isn't it? We always think that, yeah, we go to the embassy for passports, for visas, and for, yeah, some ministerial visits, etc. But sir, how is your normal day like? I'm very curious to know, because, and also the work-life balance that you have to sometimes do it for yourself, for your well-being, your family, etc. Really a little curious to know that a little bit.
No, thank you. So yes, the passport and consular services or visa services are a very important aspect of any embassy abroad, and that's how they service not only their own nationals but also the people who want to visit their country. So that's an integral part of any embassy. Yeah. But that's not really limited. This is not the only work that an embassy does. Embassies actually, or diplomats, are trying to build bridges, build ties, and see what more can be done. If there are any, problems, then how to resolve those. So right from facilitating visits at a high level, political discussions or business delegations, to sports, to culture, to academia, all the threads that you can visualize in a society. It's a role of diplomats to see whether we can build greater bridges across geographies in these times. So the work involves very wide-ranging issues, and that is what also excites many of the diplomats, because it is so wide-ranging. You were asking about my daily routine. My morning began with a visit to a company which was started 3 years back in terms of digital services, and they have both Indian and Swedish talent over there, and working together. Then I'm sitting here, I'm interacting with you, and there are 2 or 3 other engagements lined up. That's the normal day in the life of a diplomat.